All right. So as Brian was telling you, we're going to be covering animation blueprints, Blendspaces, animation montage, and take recorder. It's a amazing name for a class, I know, a little long, but shorter name could have been programmatic animation is really kind of what we're going to be looking at, but I didn't want to scare y'all with the title of the class because I know programming or talking about programming, especially for artists, can be a little daunting. So I'm going to try to make that a little bit more of a fun thing for us to learn today, and also see why it's also really awesome to do, because this is something that I love doing. I come from working in games, so this is something that I have a lot of experience with, and I'm excited to share it with you. So we're going to be covering, I'm just going to show the differences of what you've kind of learned so far, hand key versus blending versus the programmatic animation that we're going to be doing today. We're going to talk about animation blueprints some more. You're already familiar with them. We're going to get a little bit more of a deep dive in them today. We're going to look at different blend nodes. We're also going to examine what blend spaces are and how those can be pushed into state machines. I'm not going to go too deep into state machine. That's a whole class on its own, but we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're also going to look at the montage, and I'm also going to touch on the take recorder again that Gabby just talked a little bit about in her class earlier this morning. So we'll get another look at that today. But this project, I uploaded into SmashCut to have a project folder. The only thing that's really in there is just some animations that I retargeted from Mixamo. So you're welcome to use any animations that you have, and it's also just a third-person character template. So if you don't want to download that file, you want to use your own animations, you want to follow along with this lecture, you can. So this can be a follow-along lecture for y'all. You can just use the third-person template as a starting point and bring in some of your own animations. You definitely would want some walking animations. That would probably be very helpful for this lecture as well if you already have some of those. All right, so just some of the differences we're going to look at, again, hand key, blending, and some of the programmatic animations, just what those are. So y'all have been reviewing and doing, and a lot of you are familiar with just doing hand key animation. You've been exploring that a little bit more in Unreal. It's kind of the foundations of animation, really. And we're also looking at some mocap animation, but the hand key stuff, it's really our bread and butter as animators, right? But we also have some of the blending style of animations, which is taking separate animation clips and kind of stacking them together. It could be from mocap, it could be your own hand key animation, and putting it into a sequence to get some character movement across the screen. It's stuff that I've used working in cinematics in the past before. I would take some mocap that I've done and I would get it into some clips and put it into the game that I would be working on. But we're going to look at some programmatic animation, which is essentially allowing you or the animator to interact with your own animations in gameplay. Okay, so we're going to look at how we can build a blueprint and actually play our own animations with the character itself. So I'm going to give a quick example here of something like we could put together by the end of this. So here's a quick movie. This is something I just put together with some animations from Mixamo. They're in that folder with a few camera cuts. So it's just characters kind of running across the screen, trying to get another character's attention, and just moving around. This is all just me moving around with the WASD keys and the mouse. And the other character is just a blended animation that I have for the character to sort of react to. Okay, so something super simple. All right, so how do we go about putting something like that together? Well, let's look at some animation blueprints. So as you're hopefully very familiar with by now, they are a visual scripting system. So it's a way for you to actually do programming or do some C++ programming, because that's the back end of Unreal Engine, without actually having to write the code. You're going to be using some nodes that are representative of strips of code in C++. So it's going to allow you to create this complex animation logic, which is awesome. There's a blend nodes that I'm going to be reviewing pretty quickly that are going to allow you to blend between different animations. And there's also a whole host of other types of blend nodes, like a multi-blend, a blend poses by bool, a blend poses by int. There's also some enums that we're going to look at. And there's also blend multi and layered blend per bone, which is my personal favorite type of blend because I use that one a little bit more extensively. But instead of just looking at this in slides, let's actually look at this in Engine. So if you're following along, this is going to be the point where you're going to want to get Unreal open. So this is the Unreal project that I provided in SmashCut for you to download. The only thing that's in here is this lecture folder. That's the only thing that's different. I gave you some like organizational folders already for some of the stuff we're going to create. Here are those Mixamo animations that are in this folder here. There's quite a few of them that you can kind of have fun with. When I say they are retargeted, they're not retargeted well. It was a really quick retarget as I was going through trying to make some stuff for y'all. So if you're looking at this, you're like, Liz, this is not the best retargeting job. I mean, you already looked at some of the stuff that Gabby's going to be doing or did in her class. I know you're thinking, yeah, this is not that great. I know. It's just like making sure you know that I know. It was, again, just for sampling for y'all to learn from, not necessarily for you to use for any of your project stuff. So we're going to talk about the Blendspaces and the Montages, so I have folders for those, and also some animation notifies, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an animation blueprint. So I'm going to just create it in this flat lecture folder here and go up to animation and do animation blueprint. And I'm going to use the SK mannequin skeleton. I'm not using the Mixamo skeleton. I retargeted it to the SK mannequin, so you can use that one. And I'll just call this lecture for this practice. And I will double click it to open it. And it always opens on my other screen. So I will pop this sucker over here for us to take a glance at. All right. So in the slides I just reviewed with you, we looked at the different types of blends. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how those work in here. So you can right click anywhere in here, or you can hit tab, one of the two, and I'm going to type in blend. And blend, I will say, is one of the nodes within the animation blueprint that can sometimes be hard to find if you start scrolling real fast, because you'll note that it's very context sensitive. That's what this check mark is here. But you want to just lightly scroll up, and then you'll get to the blends that we're going to be playing with today. So I'm going to just click on this blend node to bring this in here. And it does have an A and a B input and an alpha. So I need to bring in two animations that I want to blend between. So just for practice, I'm going to bring in a walking loop. Just click and drag from my asset browser over here on the right. And I'll bring in a left strafe walk as well. And then I'm going to blend between these two animations. So I will just put in one of these into B, click from the output, and then put that into A. And then from this blend, I'm going to drag this into the output pose, because anything that goes into this output pose is what will play on your little sample over here. So I first must hit compile, and it's generally a good idea to hit save, especially when you're running on real live and also on a Zoom call. So you'll notice, though, that it stops playing. It's because both of these animations are not set to loop. So I'm going to loop these animations just so we can kind of keep watching it. And then I will compile one more time and save. I have a habit of compiling and saving. So right now, this blend is not actually blending anything because the alpha is set to 0. Okay, so this alpha node, or this alpha parameter, is the one that's going to allow you to see what it look like if these two are blended together. So if I just type in 0.5 and then hit compile, now it'll show you what those would look like if they're blending. But if I wanted to change it again, I'll say like or just go up to 1. I have to hit compile, and then it'll completely blend to the walking loop versus playing the left strafe walk. And if you're frustrated with the thought that I have to continually hit 0.5 and then compile, yeah, I would be frustrated too. So instead of having to keep doing that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on alpha, like the word alpha, and I'm going to promote this to a variable, and it'll make it its own node. So when I hit compile, and it's doing some fancy things with their legs over there, it'll allow me now to actually have a default parameter value down here that I can slide between, so that I could actually see what it'll look like without having to compile all the time. I still need to compile for it to actually be accepted, but I can actually, like, at least in real time, get some ideas of what the blend will look like. Okay, so this is maybe not the two best things you want to blend between. It can be if you're wanting to maybe, instead of have like a complete left and a complete straight walk, you want that 3/4 walk. So that 0.5 between the two might be a good thing to use here. But this is, again, just an example of how this blend node works. And we can use it for other things depending on your use case. So I'm holding Alt and I'm just clicking on the little inputs and outputs to disconnect these, and I'll hit compile. It'll go back to T-pose to kind of look at the different other types of blends that we have. So again, I'm going to type in the word blend. scroll up slightly. And I want to look at a blend poses by bool. That's also another one we were going to examine. So blend poses by bool is, if you know what a bool is a Boolean. It's a true or false or yes or no. That's why you have true or false nodes here, 0 or 1. So it's one or the other, okay? So again, just using these two animations and then popping this sucker into the result and hit compile, we're gonna get the very similar look that we did for the blend, except this one is not necessarily going to blend the animations together wholly like a blend does. What this is going to do is like based off this active value. So right now it's not checked. So that means that this left strafe walk is not true. It's false. So if I did check this and hit compile, then this would be the true walking animation. But this blend time you're seeing here, this is what's a little bit different. This will actually be how it blends between the true and the false pose, like for the in and the out, okay? So I'm gonna make this like very obvious, so let's bring this up to 1. And then we will, you're gonna run into the problem though, where you're not necessarily gonna get to see it because I have to compile it and it's just gonna pop on and off. So if we wanted to see this real time, we could, I may not be able to see it well if I made this a parameter, because I think it's still gonna do, actually no, it should do it well. Because you'll see now, there it goes. When I turn it on and off, you'll get to see that transition between each of them. But if I was to maybe make this lower, like 0.5, and then check this on and off, it'll go a little faster. Let's make this like really slow, like 3 and 3. It's gonna be like a little bit slower. I'm gonna have to compile it now. So now it'll be super, super, super slow transition. But as you're sort of saying, it's going to at least allow you to have that blend in between versus how they are blended wholly together. So there's some really cool things you can do with bool. And if I have time in the lecture today, I could show you a way in which you could actually use a blend poses by bool to change between a different type of animation. So like I'm holding a gun or I'm not holding a gun, or I want to change from just a walk animation in gameplay and then maybe hit the shift key, and then now the character's in a run animation. You can use a blend poses by bool to be able to say that the walk animation is true for the most part until you hit shift, and then it'll go to the false pose, which is the run pose. So then it'll play the run animation. So that's one of the examples of why bool can be a pretty cool one to use. So others that we can gander at, I'm going to try to get through these, is this blend poses by int. So adding these in here, blend poses by int is also very cool. You're going to find that I think everything is cool. This one is similar to bool in that it'll give you the same different types of way it'll blend between the animations, but an active child index. So this is referencing 0 as the 0 pose. And if I change this to 1 and compiled, it'll give me the 1 pose. But what makes this one a little different is that if you right click on the node, you can add more animation. So I can add more poses to this. So if I wanted to get the right walk in there, I could go ahead and add that in here. So now I'd have an active child index of 2 and it'll switch to the right walk. And again, if I wanted to promote this to a variable so that I could actually shift between this a little bit more in real time, you can totally do that. Okay, so this is if you needed to switch between more than just 2 animations, or you like, so if you instead had like the example I used, needed to switch from a walk run, maybe it was a walk run or a really slow walk or something else, or a sprint, you might want to use something like this. So that's kind of what you can get here with their blend poses by int. And again, you can also shift their blend times, just like you could the other one. Let me click on the active child index here so that you can kind of see the slowness of their blending. Oh, you also notice when I went to write, it stopped actually, because I also forgot to loop the animation, which I would have to compile in order for it to continue to loop. All right. So, but the one downside of using blend poses by int is if you, when you're looking at this programmatically, right, I have to always remember what 0, what 1, what 2 is, right? Especially if I'm only ever going to use this variable to switch between them. So that's one of the downsides of using an int, but there is something cool that we can use instead that would allow us to actually see the names of the animations so we can know what we're blending between. So I'm going to compile here. So what we're going to look at is what's called an enumeration, which is a really big word for something really simple. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the third person map here and actually just create a enumeration, because the one downside, well, it's not a downside of it, but if I just typed enum, E-N-U-M in here, I'm going to get a lot of them. But enumerations are actually, you have to create the file separately to get it into the blueprint editor here. So they have a bunch that for other things that they use throughout Unreal, but they're not going to have one that we can use to custom make it until we make it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a under blueprint an enumeration. Okay, and you can call this I'm just going to call this lecture sample. But you can call this, it could be your walks. It depends on the animation or what sort of enumeration you're using. So what's going to be in those animations or that node that you want. So I could have called this walking to make that simple, or walking enum to make sure that it's clear that it's an enum. So when I double click to open it, it's pretty basic in here to start. There's not a lot going on, but I can add an enumerator. And I could just keep adding depending on how many animations I have. And it's just going to ask you to change the display name. So I have walk, and then I have left walk, and then I have right walk. Okay. And then I hit save. And then you're done with your enumerator. That's pretty simple, because again, all you're doing is creating a container that you're going to be able to now inside of your anim blueprint. When I right click and I type in lecture sample, okay, you'll see this blend by enum, Blendspaces lecture sample, which is why naming it is important. All right. So right now it doesn't, you'll notice that you don't see the stuff that we made, and it's because you need to right click, and then at the bottom, you need to add them as separate pins. All right. So now I could just come in here. I'm gonna put these in a better order based off of how I have this listed. We'll do regular walk, left walk, right walk, and hit compile, and pop that into your output and then compile. And it's going to do the same darn thing that the int did, but now I have a little bit more of a fancy naming way of looking at it, right? But you're also like, hey, okay, let's go ahead and promote this sucker to variable. Awesome. So the downside you're going to find, like when we compile this again, is that it's still going to be numbers, which is not ideal, right? I don't want to continue to look at numbers. I want the friggin' names. That's the whole reason I'm using an enumerator. So the thing you have to do to get to be able to see the names is, right now the issue that we're having is that the variable type is set to byte. And you want to set this to the name of your enumerator, which is lecture sample. All right, and it's gonna cry at you for a moment. It's because you're trying to change the variable type, and they really want to make sure that you want to do this. And yes, I do. So now that it's done that, I can compile, and down here you'll see active enum value right walk, left walk, walk. Hey, pretty awesome. So now I get the ability to be able to like at least have a list, so I can resort back to this sometime if I wanted to switch between different animations. Okay, so enumerator is pretty cool, I have to say. All right, so enumerator, that's also neat, but then we're going to get to this another blend. We're almost through these blend names. Blend multi. All right, so blend multi is going to, you can add or blend between multiple types of blends in here. So I can add all of these together. It's going to look fancy. So it's like, nope, because everything starts at 0. Okay. So I need to tell it what's the desirable. Okay, let's just say 1. So it's going to 100% play the walking loop. So what blend multi does, it's a little bit different. It's more close to the blend node than it is the blend int or the blend bool or the blend enum. It's going to blend these based off a percentage of each other. So when I make all of these 1, for instance, this is going to be kind of funny. It's just going to go center because I have 1 going to the left, 1 going to the right, 1 going center. So when all of them are on, it's like the 100% value of that is going to be 50% for that. So it kind of perfectly created a center walk. So this wouldn't make sense to blend between, but it could, I could change this to something like 0.5, and it'll slightly go in a different direction. I would likely wouldn't want to blend between a right and a left strafe, but I could. So this is essentially allowing you to blend more animations together than a normal blend would. That's why it's called a blend multi. So that's pretty simple. But now we're going to get to my favorite, which is the layered blend per bone. Why is this my favorite? You probably see that per bone and you're like, that's why. Because what this is going to allow you to do is you have to put in a base pose. Okay. And you can put in another pose. So again, I'm just choosing 2 here. Add this in there and hit compile for now. And it's just going to not really do a whole lot. But on this node itself, under layer setup, you want to open up the array elements. Okay, so there has 1 member or 0 array elements, so there's nothing here. I'm going to hit this plus sign and then open it up 1 more time. And then you can actually list a bone name. Okay, so what's going to happen, and if you're unsure of your skeleton, like I'm assuming y'all are going to be very familiar now with the bones names in your skeleton, but if you're opening a new skeleton maybe that's not yours, that you're not familiar with, one of the things I love about Unreal is that it keeps everything really easy to access. So I could just go to the skeleton here and get the skeleton bone list real quickly, and I want to blend from everything from the spine up. So I only want the spine up information, or spine 01. So I will do spine underscore 01 because you need to have the exact name in here. All right, and I'll hit compile. So what's kind of happening now is that it's blending these 2 animations. So remember, the left strafe is looking to the left, and I'm getting a little bit more of an extra arm swing there. So I'm able to have my character look to the left and have the leg forward animation. So if I switch these around, if you're just kind of curious what that might look like, it's now going to have interesting different directional animation. So let's kind of just let's see if I can do it this way. There we go. So right now I don't have a base pose. I could just make it it's like I could just leave it like this, and you'll notice that it's only going to be doing everything from the spine up because this is what it's going to be blending against. So I don't necessarily have to have it, just going to give it the T pose. Okay, so I could also make this the let's look at the like clavicle underscore L. So like change it to there and compile it. So then it'll only give 1 arm. So if you're trying to like layer some animations, or I only want to, and we're going to use some examples later, I want to keep the character running and I want the upper body to do a lot of fancy things. Doing layer blend per bone is going to be that thing you'll want to use to make it to where you can split your animations like this. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this and compile, keep it in T pose. All right. So those are the different types of blends that we can make work with within an animation blueprint. And I now want to look at blend spaces. So we're really talking about blending today, because that's really what's the power of this sort of programmatic animation, is understanding the different ways in which you can blend animations together, because you have to sort of have animations to work with to programmatically get them to work with one another. So blend spaces are assets that specify animations along a graph at different points. It allows smooth transitions between animations based off of input values. So we're going to be looking at, there's 4 different types. Okay, there is a aim offset 1D, blend space, and a blend space 1D. I do want to make sure you note that the 1Ds are under legacy now, not because they're bad or anything, but we'll talk about why in just a second. So a 1D, and this is probably likely the why for you, is it's a single directional blend. Okay, so it's mostly going to be used if you're trying to adjust speed of animation, so something very specific. But a blend space is dual directional, so commonly used for the horizontal and vertical axis between speed and direction. So I want to be able to have the character or blend between a certain direction, and I want to have to know the character speed. This is what's going to be useful. And also the reason why the 1Ds are becoming more of a legacy is because you can use this typical or regular blend space in a single direction. You don't have to use, if so say you only wanted to get speed, you don't have to put direction in there. You could just leave it blank and it's still going to work. Okay. So let's make a friggin' blend space. All right. They're pretty fun. All right, so for blend spaces, I'm going to go into this blend space folder that I made, and I'm going to right click under animation, blend space. And again, those legacy blend spaces are right here if you want to fiddle with those. And again, I'm going to use the SK mannequin. So the name of the blend space. So what are we trying to blend between here? Okay, so what I want to blend between is I want to generally when you're trying to do anything, especially with character animation within a game engine that's a character-based animation, you want to be able to have a character idle. You want to be able to have them walk or maybe run. So I want to be able to develop a walk and a run and an idle, like how I would blend between, how we should blend between those various states for a character. Okay, so I tend to name my blend spaces based off the states that I'm going to blend between. So in this case, I'll just do idle and walk. Keep it real simple for right now. And open that up. And this is your blend space editor. All right. The nice thing about Unreal is that it tends to be really common between various different types of animation editors, you know, like the skeletal editor. And this is like, you got your details on the left, you have your asset browser on the right. It's going to make things a little bit simpler as we kind of move through here, where the things are kind of really similarly put together. So on the left here, under the asset details, we have your horizontal axis and vertical axis. So that is where we're going to be putting the different types of, we're going to determine the direction, speed, or what we're going to do with this animation. So we're going to keep this super basic to start, and we're just going to focus on speed. Okay, we're going to type that sucker in. So then we have to choose the axis value for the X and the Y. So essentially the max and the min is what we're looking for. So how do we determine maximum speed? Well, what we're making this for, okay, I'm going to go back to my third person map for a moment, is the third person character. Okay, so if I hit play right now, there is a default one that's already on here. Okay, so there's already, I'm just hitting WASD to move my character around. But we're going to replace these pretty generic animations with something that we have. So I want to be able to replace this with this third person character. All right, so we need to know the speed of that character, or like what the character movement is. Otherwise, anything we put on there, there's going to be maybe slippy, slidey feet, or the animation might move too slow, might move too fast. So how do we figure out what the movement speed is for this character? How do we even change the movement speed? And you would do that on the blueprint for the character, not the animation blueprint, the character blueprint. There is a very big difference between the two. So under the third person folder in here, blueprints, you'll see BP third person character. This is a good thing to know and a good thing to just get comfortable with, because this essentially is how Unreal is telling your computer that what equals moving forward, what equals moving backwards, what is the character that we're going to be visually showing on screen at any given time. Do they jump? It's essentially just deeply connected with the game itself. And this animation blueprint that we're making is actually a class within the blueprint or the character blueprint. Okay, So if you want to see the character movement, okay, you'll see on the character blueprint here, there's character movement. And you can see if you scroll down, the walk speed is set to 500 centimeters per second. So this number directly relates to this speed that we're going to put in here. So if I left this at 100, it would not necessarily look really good if I was going to be using this character or third person character and putting my animations on there. It might be a little too fast or too slow. So I'm going to
Liz,
yes.
Do you mind slowing the pace down just a bit? There's just a couple comments about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I can't see the chat, y'all. So thank you for telling me to slow down. So again, I'm not changing the blueprint or the character blueprint here. I am just going to be making sure that these numbers align. Okay, and if you do not recall where this was located, just real quick, I'm going to go to third person blueprints under BP third person character. All right. And then I just clicked on the character movement menu right there. Okay, so back on here, I'm going to set this to 500. And the rest of this you can kind of leave default. So the grid divisions is directly relating to the number of grid lines that are here for the horizontal axis. Okay, so if I change this to 2, for instance, I'll have less of those grid numbers. All right, and I usually like to have snap to grid on because what this is going to do, and I'll just give you a quick demonstration for this, is you're going to be dragging the animations you want to blend between into this workspace right here. So it says drag and drop animations from the asset browser to place sample points. So at the bottom though, because I'm going to be using speed, okay, so we're going to go across this way, the horizontal axis. So I'm going to grab, you can grab any idle you want. I'll do idle. And we're going to start it over here to the left. And when you see if I like have snap on, I'm trying to like move it and it's not letting me, it's going to keep trying to snap to every horizontal axis, but it won't snap to the vertical axis, which is okay, but a little annoying. So if I go to vertical axis and just open that up, I can hit snap and it'll now snap to each of these, which makes it nice. All right. So we can also start, there's some smoothing in here, but right now what I want to do is start getting my walking animation in here. So I'm just going to go to my walking loop. I can click and just put this all the way to 500 if I want. And if you hold control on your keyboard and then just drag your mouse, you don't have to left click drag or anything. You can just drag your mouse. You'll see the character blend from 0 to 500. All right. Super simple. Wonderful. We just created an animation blueprint. Or sorry, not animation blueprint. We created a blend space. That's all you have to do for this. And I can hit save. So how do we trigger this? I'm going to make a more complicated one in a minute. I'm definitely going to do that because this is pretty basic. So I'm going to go back to my animation blueprint. Okay, I keep things up here at the top as just tabs to kind of make it easy access because y'all know how many windows you can have in Unreal. But again, if you're trying to find those, I'm just coming into this animation blueprint that I initially created. So I'm gonna get rid of those. So essentially what I'm doing with this blend space is I'm making it to where I don't need these animation clips, okay? Because I'm putting it in my blend space. I'm gonna go ahead and drag out this idle walk into here. And I can just click it into there. Hit compile. Great. So we could do this. But I want to talk about a state machine really quickly, because I think a state machine is going to make this a little bit cleaner to work with. So let me hit save real quick. And I'm going to go back to my slides real fast. So a state machine, I mentioned it briefly, and I'm also not going to spend a lot of time on state machines because, as I said, this could be a whole lecture by itself. But state machines are a way in which you can define the different types of character movements. So I could have a state that's just idle. I could have a state that's just walking. I could have a state that's just running or jumping, but blend spaces allow us to kind of be able to easier or make an easier way of like merging between those. Or if you have a more complicated idle, maybe it needs to be its own state. I've made idles before where after X amount of time, a different idle would switch, or I would have different idles depending on different situations. So it really needed its own state so that it could, depending on the programmatic things that I developed, it would go between different idle elements. But it's going to essentially simplify a complex animation without requiring a complex animation graph, which is what we would end up having to create if we just stuck with those animation nodes that we were looking at before. So it allows us to transition smoothly between one another in its own anim graph layer. So we're going to create a new one, or a layered anim graph. So the idle state, as I said, might have only the idle animation in it. That might be all it has. The walking state might have just the walking animation. Its purpose is to just create animation for that state. And as I mentioned, blend spaces can also go in here. So that's likely what we're going to do right now, is that we're going to put our blend space in a state machine and see how we can make it work. But because now we're trying to make a way to where I can programmatically control this animation that I have created, I also have to create something in the event graph for this anim blueprint that will trigger my ability to use this animation. So if y'all wanted to screenshot this really quickly, absolutely go ahead and do so, because this is what we're going to build in our anim blueprint anim graph, or sorry, our event graph, so that we can programmatically control our animation. Okay, I will be showing this again. So if you miss screenshotting it, that's why I'm talking a little bit longer, to give you all that opportunity to screenshot it real quick. We'll be covering this again. All right. So back in Unreal, this is one way we could directly connect it in here, but instead I'm going to create a state machine by right-clicking and typing just state machine. And I want to name this state machine. You could call it Loco or Loco Motion if you wanted to, but give it something other than new state machine. And because I actually always forget, I just tend to deep or just dive right into the state machine. I'm going to go ahead and connect it to my output pose so I don't forget to do that later. And I'm going to open it up. And as I mentioned, now it is just a nested anim graph. Okay, so we still have our anim graph here in the little breadcrumbs, but now when I double click into it and open it, it just opens up another anim graph for me to work from. So there's this entry point that will allow us to create a different state. And all I'm going to do is right click on here. And well, actually, I'm going to drag in my idle walk and say, boop, connected. There's my state. Okay, created a single state that has idle walk. And if I double click on this, it's already got it connected in there for me. Wonderful. Don't you love when they do things for you? Okay, so again, I can go back through these breadcrumbs. And I will say, when you start breadcrumbing a little like this, or you start getting into nested animations, you can get lost a little bit, because I've had it happen where I'm like, where did my anim graph go? Because I'm looking up here in different tabs, and you'll notice I already have like a bunch of locomotion tabs that are getting open, and I don't know what happened or how that happened. You close things and realize you shouldn't have. Totally okay. If you ever lose your anim graph, it's just over here. So you also on the left, you can see the breadcrumbs and the different nested states. So if you do get lost, just know you can be found again. All right. So right now, all this is doing, if I hit compile, it's going to be an idle, but if I change the speed to say 500, hit compile, it'll go to walk. So it's going to transition from 0 to 500, which is the walk. Okay. But as we looked at when we were doing the blends, how you don't want to continue to have to change this number, okay? Because this number should be defined by the game itself, by how fast the character is moving. It should actually be programmatically defined. It should not be manual input. So in order for me to do some programmatically defining ways of actually having the speed get determined by the game, I do need to make this a variable like we did earlier. So I'm going to right click and say promote to variable. Okay, so now we have a speed variable. Compile and save. Just make sure you're saving because Unreal crashes sometimes. All right, so remember that thing I mentioned that you would want to screenshot because we're going to build it. So now we're going to go to the event graph. The event graph in the Anim blueprint is just a way of like saying, it's a way of connecting events to the game. Okay, so that's why it gives you a node to start with, which is event blueprint update animation. Okay, so this is actually your runtime event. And when I say by runtime, it's when the game is running, do this. Okay, but before we do this, I actually need a different event because I do need to tell it what I want it to play initially. So I'm going to right click and type in event, INT or INI. You want event blueprint initialize animation. All right. And we will take a break after we do this. So if you're all like, whoa, this is a lot, just don't worry. A break is coming. So what initializing animation is essentially going to be when the game starts, do this. And then event update animation is as the game is running, do this. So we need both. Okay. So this try get pawn owner is going to, when it says self, so it's going to be our character. So what character do we want to associate this to? And that is going to be this BP third person character. So our character blueprint, the one that is actually running in the game. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to type cast to and then type BP. And I'm typing BP because that's the name of the blueprint. So if you're using a different character blueprint, you want to type in that name. Okay. So when you're saying cast to, you're saying go to this particular blueprint. All right. And I just want to connect this and this into here because I want it to be itself. So this character into cast the blueprint or for the blueprint. And then the only other thing I want it to do is then set this character. So it needs to be set at the time we launch the game. So I'm going to right click on as PP third person character and say promote to variable. And that's it. We're setting it to get to start at that point. All right. And now it's the fun part because remember that speed. We need to make it to where the character or that speed variable is associated with this character. So it knows how to walk. All right. So we need it to be associated with the BP character. So I'm going to, in my variables, because I added this in here, I now have a new variable of as third person character. So if I clicked and dragged into here, I can say get as third person character. I don't want to set it to anything. I just want to get the variable and bring it in. So it's just a little standalone variable with an output. And then I want it to know its velocity, right? Because speed, velocity, I want to be able to know how fast is this character moving or how, like, what is that? If I hit W, that's going to tell the computer, tell Unreal, this go to 500. That's or centimeters per second. So I need to know that. So I'm going to pull this out here and I'm going to type in get velocity if you spell it correctly. And if you have a hard time finding it, it's going to be at the bottom here. Okay. Should look like that. So I'm getting the velocity of this BP character. And I need to actually change because of the way the velocity, the data is coming in, it needs to be changed to a different type of data for me to associate it with my speed variable. So I'm going to also convert it to a vector. Just say vector length. All right. And now I can get my speed variable in here. Okay, so just going to drag this into here and say set. And connect this to here. And connect this to here. So all this is doing is saying update animation, check every frame, how fast is the character moving? Okay, so get that information. Okay, and the speed, because remember, the speed is associated with, oops, it's on, see, I lost it right here. So this is what's telling the animation to change, right? Because when it was 0, it was idle. When it was 500, it was walking, right? So now what's going to happen, now that it's on here, is the computer or the game or Unreal is going to change those numbers for me. I don't get to do that. All right. So I'm going to hit compile and then save. And then the last thing you need to do is associate this anim blueprint to your blueprint character. Okay, so again, your blueprint character is down here under BP third person character. I just already have the tab open. I'm going to click on the main character here and change the anim class from the anim blueprint Quinn to the lecture one that I've created. That's all. And then compile and save. So once you've done that, you can hit play and now your character will walk. It's not the best walk. Actually looks a little fast. So after this break, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll do some adjustments on this, make this look a little nicer. And then we'll kind of start talking about some anim montages and take recorder and having some more fun with how we can get some animations plugged into this character so it's now under our control. But again, I'm just hitting AW or ASAD, AWS, WASD as it's called. But let's take a quick break. Come back at 1:01, or it's Pacific. I'm not sure where y'all are. So 10 minutes, and we'll continue to talk about some of this.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. All right, Liz, back to you.
All right. Let me share my screen one more time.
Hey, Liz, just also too, when you get a chance, one of the general questions that I'm seeing a lot in the chat is a lot of folks are kind of wanting to know how this can be integrated into a linear content creation or traditional animation style role for film and production and so forth. So anything that you can share on that of how and what these could be potentially used for greater purposes would be helpful so that people kind of get an idea.
Yeah, so I was looking at the chat as well. So I saw there's just like one thing. I'm sorry, I've been going a little fast. It's a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. But we also have the lab after this. So if you do have general questions, I am more than happy to sort of walk you through some of those. But what's awesome about this particular method of doing animation in Unreal is that it will allow you to sort of quickly be able to create or be the actor, I suppose, like, because you're controlling your character. So you can move around your environment and create and capture with a camera, really, anywhere. And we're going to get to that part when we use take recorder, because that's what take recorder is going to be about. So we're essentially, that video I showed you earlier was all done using the animation blueprint and the blueprint character, where I just moved around the scene and set up cameras to be able to capture a cinematic, essentially. So if you've ever seen various trailers that might just say like this is game footage, or that's people who are actually like capturing cinematics or capturing film or animation just by controlling a character with a game controller. So it doesn't have to be WASD. I'm just not using an Xbox or a different type of controller on my computer right now, but you can use game controllers. You can use whatever you're most comfortable with to control your character that you've now kind of custom developed and put your own animations on. So that's really the beauty of this process, that I really like. It's something that I have a lot of experience doing, and I'm hopefully you'll like to try it out as well. So yeah, hopefully that helps answer a little bit more, Brian.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure. All right. So before I get into the animation montage, I did want to hop back into Unreal, just do a quick review of what we sort of looked at here. So I hit the play button at the top here so I can get in the gameplay mode. And we sort of now have the ability to control our character, but the animation is sliding a little bit. And it's only just a walk forward. There's not a lot going on, but I have the ability to move the character around the scene and do the things that I need to do. But the character's timing isn't necessarily looking great. And some of that is because I am using the BP third person character. And I did see some questions about why we're using this one and not making our own. And some of it's just because for just a tutorial of getting started with this, I didn't want to go into actually developing an entire blueprint of how you can programmatically control or connect your keyboard and your gameplay controller to your characters. It allows us to kind of just get started quickly. But that character movement might be a little fast actually, because it does say walk speed, but this character actually had a idle walk run. And so the 500 was actually blending between the idle, the walk, and the run. So if I set this walk speed down to 250, maybe that's the speed I want the walk, the animation might start to look better. But if I set this to 250, I also need to do it on my idle walk here. So I would need to change this. I'm just going to move this to half speed first, so like about 250, and then change this the speed axis to 250. So if I hit save, and I also want to make sure I compile and save on my Anim blueprint, because anytime you change anything, you got to hit compile. And then I hit play. And now it's actually looking a lot better as far as the movement speed is going. So we did pretty well there. Okay, so that's just if you wanted to see the fix for changing that, that's going to be how you might have to go back and forth in adjusting the character speed versus your animation speed that you're setting. You want to make sure that the blend space and the character movement are in line with one another. All right, so it's all well and good to create section, to do all the basic movement, but I want to add some fun animations in here, right? Because walking is one thing, but I want to get some more unique personality or just something happening for my character, that maybe I'm creating an animated short and I want to be able to have a character that's going to actually act or do something other than walking. So that's where an animation montage is going to get you what you're looking for, because what this is going to do, it's going to enable you to merge multiple animation sequences into one asset. So, and then you can manage that playback via the blueprints. Okay. So it's going to allow you to use multiple sequences that you can break down. So if you wanted to, you can have one animation and one animation montage, or you can have multiple that are divided by sections. I'll show you how you can work with sections, but you can play them back in any order dynamically. It just depends on how you want to play them. And the most important thing about animation montages is going to be the slots, because they're going to be used to essentially organize your animations. And if you don't have a slot set for your animation montage or for your character animation blueprint, then your montage will just not work. So these slots actually are going to relate directly to the animation blueprint itself. So we're going to look at that right now. So back in Unreal, I'm going to go to this montages folder, and I'm going to right click and create an animation montage using the same SK mannequin skeleton. And just for now, I'm going to call this charge, because I have a charge animation that we'll use. And double click it to open it. And just like looking at Blendspaces, you'll note that it is going to be very similar in how it's laid out. But the only difference is going to be some of the asset details as well as the information at the bottom here, but you still have your asset browser over here on the right. So I'm going to look for this charge animation and I'm going to click and drag it into this default slot area here. Okay. So if I was to scrub my timeline, you'll just kind of get to see it's just a character kind of moving and adjusting the animation or just kind of charging forward. Okay. So it's a little bit more of a dynamic animation. Over here on the left, you can choose to loop that animation, which I would not want to because this is a pretty much a one-off animation. You can also adjust the blend in and blend out time for your characters. So this is going to be when it blends from your last animation. So if I'm in my walk animation, then it would blend into the montage. You can adjust that timing, and you could also adjust the type or mode of blending as you wish. You can create custom curves. So this is mainly the areas you're going to mess with the most is going to be your blend in and blend out. Okay. But for right now, this is all you need to do to get started on creating an animation montage. You just had to drag in the animation and you're done. Okay. But because we're doing this at gameplay, we do need to have something that will programmatically say how this will play. It doesn't play by magic. Okay. One of the things I also want to make sure you note is that this is that default slot. Okay, it's also a section. I'm going to hit save real quick because as I mentioned in my slides, we need to make sure that we have a default slot assigned on our animation blueprint for this montage to work. So if I go back to my anim blueprint and then go to my anim graph. Okay, right now, again, if you got lost, it's because I'm in my state machine. I can go through the breadcrumbs to the anim graph. All right. And then I need to create a default slot for this animation to feed into. Okay, so I'm going to type in default slot. And this is the default slot. So all you got to do is just say go in and then out. Okay, that's it. It's just a way to tell it. So I have all this animation that's now getting fed into the default slot as well, so that if anything is called from this default slot, it will work or it'll recognize it and hit compile and save. Your animation shouldn't change. If you get an error, then there's something else wrong, but this shouldn't actually affect anything. All right. Then the other thing we need to do is a way in which we call this, or how are we going to actually play this animation? So that's going to be, again, through the BP third person character. So your character blueprint. Okay. BP third person character. So on the event graph, I'm just going to go off to the side here. You don't have to worry about any of that. We're just going to right click and hit play. Actually, I'm going to type in montage. It's going to be montage. So you're going to have a couple montage nodes. I want to make sure you're aware of both of them because they don't work the same. So they have the play montage node and then the play anim montage node. So the differences between the two is if you use the play, I mean, there's a lot of differences. There's a whole lot more programmatically you can do on this end than you can on this one. And this one, though, if you were to use this one, you would also have to pipe in this character mesh node into your in skeletal component for it to work appropriately. Which is why I would say just don't use this one and just focus on play anim montage for now, because the only thing you got to do for this one is just set the type, the anim montage that you want to use, which is charge. And then that's it. It's a little bit simpler. But what we do need is some event to trigger this. And so I'm going to just right click in here and I'm going to use like the 1 key, maybe. So I'll just type in the number 1 and type key, not debug 1 key. You want to roll down or scroll down until you see 1 with a little keyboard. So a keyboard event. Okay. And then all you have to do is say when 1 is pressed, go. Easy peasy. Compile and save. All right. So when I hit the 1 key, it should play that anim charge. Let's see if it works. So we'll go to third person map and hit play. And I'm just going to hit the 1 key and Shazam. I get a new animation. Wonderful. The downside though is if I chose to walk and then hit this, it'll also work. So that's not necessarily the best thing in the world, right? But if you're the controller, if you're the person who's going to be developing this animation for somebody, you can just say like, well, I'm just not going to move the character when I hit this, and I'm going to wait for the whole animation to end. You could do that, or we could make it to where it's not allowed to move whenever you're playing a full body animation, right? So that's where these anim notifies can be pretty useful. Okay, so we have a situation where I'm playing a full body animation that I want to actually like sequence or just like not have the character move because it'll have the character sliding all over the place. So this notify can be used to also disable movement for your character. It can be used to spawn particles or sounds. There's a whole host of things that you can do for this. Okay, so what we're going to look at, again, Daniel or Phil, if you want to screenshot this little bad boy here and put that into that Slack chat for folks who might want to use this later. This is what we're going to build so that we can disable movement for the character. So this top one here is actually going to, it's for me, I may not show this one just because I think for just time's sake. This is just a notifier. So when you look at this, it says notify begin. So whenever the game starts, it's going to display, it's just appending a string that's going to say notify begin. So it's just a way of sort of like letting you know that your montage is playing, and then it'll let you know when it ends, because I'll also have a notify end. So this one isn't necessarily super important, but this one down here, receive notify end, this one will set the movement, and I'm going to create one that'll also disable the movement for the begin. So we're going to do receive notified begin, disable movement, receive notified end, re-enable it, because we need the character to start moving again, right? So let's build that really quickly. Well, not that quickly. I'm going to go slow. So on this notifies, I'm going to right click, and we're going to create a blueprint class. We're going to go to all classes and open that up and type anim notify state. Okay, so under, again, anim notify state, you got to type the whole thing out in order to find the blueprint class that you're looking for. So once you've typed that out, you can go ahead and click on this, and it'll open up a new blueprint that I'm going to call ANS, short for anim notify state. I'll call this no movement, because we wanted to, well, maybe we can just call it movement. No movement works. All right. So in here, we're going to create a couple functions. Okay. So don't click on the plus sign. That's not what we want. We want to click on this override drop down here, where we're going to say received notify begin and receive notify end. All right. So in the notify end and begin, there are two tabs up here. Just going to give myself some space. So what this means is that at the start, so whenever the montage is triggered, it's going, this is what will happen. So when we hit 1 on our keyboard, when we want to start that charge motion, I don't want the character to be able to move. The character's got to stop moving. Okay. So we're going to, from the mesh, or so the mesh comp, okay, I want to get the owner. So just like we got the pawn owner for earlier, I want to be able to say, I need the, I'm going to disable that, hold Alt and click. I need to get the BP character again. So cast to BP, third person character, once again, because that's who we're telling to stop moving, right? And I'll drag this into there because that's the input to output. And then super simple, all we got to do is right click one more time and hit disable movement. Don't you love, don't put a space in there, you know, Unreal hates space. But you notice when I'm typing disable movement, I'm not getting anything. And the reason for that and I'll just do it one more time, disable movement, is because it's context sensitive. Okay, when it's context sensitive, that means that it's going to be sensitive to where it's coming from. And because disable movement is a node that is dependent on an input, it's not going to give it to me with no context. Okay, so if I wanted to bring in the context, I could just drag out from this node and then type disable movement. And then it'll pull it up because it's recognizing the context that it's coming from. Okay, so it brings me a couple nodes. Just making some space here. Click and drag this into the return node. And I need to make sure this is going into the character movement because it is the BP character's character movement that I want to disable. And then compile and save. And that's it. I have now disabled the movement for the character. Well, not actually, because I do need to say where this should go, okay? And how is this associated with the animation montage? Because this by itself is fine, but all of these need to be intertwined and associated with something else. So to associate this to your anim montage, you got to put it on your anim montage, right? Because that's what these notifies stand for. So I'm going to create an add notified track. Oh, haha, I had it collapsed and I wasn't seeing it getting made. So I'm going to remove these other tracks here. So I'm going to right click next to the one track and hit add notify state, ANS no movement. And it's going to look like this. So you have two little, like what look like keyframes. I'm just going to click and drag this until it's the entirety of the clip. So I'm going to actually like make this a little bit bigger to make sure that it is the entirety of the clip here. And you're not going to see it inside of the anim montage because this is just a notify. It is just a way, especially because this one is more during gameplay. This is just a way for it to say like whenever the character montage plays or anim montage plays, this notification will happen. And this notification has code in there that says do not move. So I need to go back and save my anim montage. And if I hit play again and just hit started moving and hit 1, my character abruptly stops because I disabled movement. But I also did not re-enable movement, so the character can't move again. So I need to go back to my anim notify state to go to this notify end and make it to where I re-enable that movement. So just like I did for here, I'm going to get owner. So from the mesh comp, so I can get it in context. I'm going to get the owner. Whoops. That's why I need to read. I got the wrong one. Get owner. There we go. And then cast to BP, third person character. So very much the same process because we're pretty much just doing the same thing. The difference though is going to be out here because I'm now instead going to say set movement for the character. And the movement I want is for the character to be walking. So new movement mode, walking. And again, make sure I connect this in here. All right. So if you wanted to take a screenshot of that one, Shazam, this is the get owner cast to the character to set the movement to walking for the end. And then for the beginning, cast to the character again, but disable the movement. All right. So once I hit compile and save and then come back here, I'm moving, I hit 1. I cannot continue to move forward even though I am trying to, but I can now also continue to move after that animation. So what's awesome though about these animation montages is that I can continue to make as many montages as I want, right? I could add to this one. I could create those sections and slots. But, or we can kind of continue to go forward. So let me make sure, I keep saying it's not saving, so I want to make sure I save that one. So we did the notifies, and we're not going to do sequencer quite yet, because I do want to make, now that I have some time, I want to come in and show you what you can do with these additional slots. So I mentioned that one of my favorites was the layered blend per bone. And I could keep working on this particular anim montage. I would want another full body animation. I have some, these are some decent animations, but let's create another one. So again, go to montages, right click, animation montage. And I'm gonna call this one waving. Oh, pick your skeleton. Do that. Waving. All right. And it looks like it's gotten some echoes of my previous animation in there, which is funny. So I'm going to drag in waving, but I'm also going to drag in this small wave animation. All right. So I'm going to have two different types of waves. So when you have two animations in here, it will play both of them. Okay. Unless you tell it not to. Because right now, if I was be like, cool, I'm done, no problem. And I don't necessarily need to disable movement for this one if I don't want to, but let's just start playing this one to see what it looks like. So go to the BP character for the blueprint. Let's create another anim montage. So play anim montage. Right, and then instead of number 1, I'm going to do the 2 key and plug that in. Okay, and then make sure I'm playing the waving animation. Simple as that, right? Just got a whole other animation set that I can play in gameplay. So if I hit play, I hit 2. Wonderful. And then it should also play the other one, which does not blend really well between each other. Not really a big fan of that. So I don't want them to play both because they don't really blend well like this. So over here, or rather, if you wanted to go, if you don't have this window here, it's your sections. We want to divide this into separate sections right now, because right now it's just one default slot section that blends between waving and small wave. So if you right click up here under montage default group, this little section here, just right click and say new montage section, and I'll call this SM_wave. And I want to align this. Move this real quick with the start of the animation. And I'm also going to make another one instead of the default slot to just call this waving. And move that over default. Oops. So with these two here, you'll see these two little arrows. Now, this arrow means that it's going to continue into the next animation, and then this one's going to go back to the beginning. So that's where under montage sections, so under window, if you don't have the sections window open, just go montage sections, but I do here. This will show you that it's going to just sort of play between these animations. If I clicked on this arrow, I just say remove link for both of them. It'll play them as separate animations. Okay. But when I make sections, let me hit save real quick. In my character blueprint, you'll see that under play anim montage, there is a start section name. So I can say, I want this animation blueprint to only play maybe small wave. Okay. So if I want to type it in exactly. So when I hit compile and save and hit 2, it now only plays the small wave and it then goes back to the idle. Okay. And I would need another. I can just copy and paste this instead of having to look for it each time, and then 3 key. And change this to waving. Because I think that's the name of it. It should be, yep, it's waving. So again, double checking to make sure the names are right. Compile and save. So when I hit 2, it plays the small wave. When I hit 3, it'll play the bigger wave. And when I hit 1, it'll still do the charge. So I now have 3 animations. Well, I have like more animations. I have the walking animation. I have 3 other animations that are all getting played at various times. So I'm starting to build things that this character can do and react to within the world that I have. So one of the things that would be useful is that I don't really, the character staying put, I would love to be able to walk and wave at the same time so that I can have more fun with this. So, or give my characters a little bit more ability to move. So if I'm going to do that, that is where, remember I mentioned my favorite again was that layered blend per bone, where I can say anything from the waist up I want to keep, but I want to have something else be from the waist down. Okay. So that's where in here, we're going to have to do some stuff. Okay. And we're also going to have to do some stuff in our animation montage, because I'm going to need to give this a different slot, because default slot is essentially the full body animation. And I just want to have the upper body. That is all it's going to function. So I'm going to make a new slot, but I think by default, if I go to this slot dropdown, they actually by default have an upper body slot. So I can just switch this to upper body slot. And anytime you change the slot, you do kind of need to jiggle this a little bit to kind of get it to fix itself. It's just one of those little bugs. So that this now, it's not going to be layered yet, but now I have a slot for upper body. So I'll hit save. And on my lecture, or again, this is my character blueprint, just so make sure or not my character blueprint, excuse me, my animation blueprint. I need to bring in a way to separate out the upper body animation. So I'm going to get rid of this real quick. And I'm going to do what's called caching this animation into its separate node. So it's called CACHE, new cached pose. It's essentially going to take all of this data and just put it into an output that I can then call and put into something else. So it's allowing me to be a little bit cleaner in how I'm going to build this particular pathway. It'll look clean once I'm done. But I'm going to rename this, and we can call this full body, or you can call it locomotion. You can call it whatever makes the most sense to you. But I still, because this is my core state machine, I still want to take this and use this for making my upper body animation. So I'm going to say cache again, CACHE, and I'm going to use this full body cache pose now to layer the animation. So right click, and we're going to look for that blend, the layered blend per bone. All right. So for this, what we're going to layer, it's like I can take this directly into here, but remember, I created an upper body slot. So I do need to get a slot that is going to also be associated with this. So I'll right click, or I could actually just copy and paste this instead of typing out default slot again. So Control C, Control V. And on the default slot, it'll let me choose the different upper body slot. And I can drag this into here. Okay. And I'm just going to copy and paste the cache pose and put that into base pose. It's just going to be putting itself, but then one of them is going to be getting driven through the upper body. That will be upper body only. But then this is what's going to determine that it is upper body only. Okay. So like I showed earlier, we're going to change the branch filter. We're going to add this and to type in spine underscore 01, because that is the bone that we want to blend. And I need to also put this into the result. All right, it's not going to be too obvious. So let's see if this works. So what should happen is if I'm walking and then I hit 2, my character will walk and wave. And if I hit 3, my character will now be able to walk and wave. But if I hit 1, character's movement is disabled and the character can't walk. So what I've successfully been able to do is make it to where the character can have a full body animation and the character can have a single upper body animation. And if I wanted to go through my list of animations and make some more, I can absolutely do that. Okay. So it's really dependent on the specific type of scene and scenario you're trying to build so that you can add the animations and create the scenarios that you need to be able, or create essentially the blends that you need so that you can get the looks that you want. All right. So at this point, I feel like we have a character that we can now set up a scene for. So we can start using the take recorder to capture some of this. All right. So Gabby fantastically showed you one such example, but the take recorder, it's essentially going to be to allow you to capture gameplay or to capture you doing to your character the things that you wanted to do. You are the actor and the director. Okay. The whole reason we're building this character from the ground up is to give this character the ability to move in a way that we can give it a better performance. We can actually choose how it performs for the scene that we're creating. Okay. Versus having to hand key that or blend that into, and maybe if we decide, oh, I didn't look good, or I didn't like how that got edited, and you have to go back and like really painstakingly change those animations or change the position of the character and how they might move to the character or how they might move to the camera. In this way, I can now just literally move the character to the camera in the way that I want, or position the camera with the character in the way that I want, so that I can be the actor and be the director at the same time. All right. So we're going to be using subsequences to be able to come into here to edit them. You could also add level sequences in there if you wanted to. You can add the live link that Gabby was showing you. So take recorder is a really, really powerful tool that will allow you to essentially record your gameplay and create some really fantastic moments. So let's go ahead and start doing some of this recording, or start kind of rocking with this character that we have going in here. All right. So to get take recorder open, as Gabby mentioned in the last class, under Window, Cinematics, Take Recorder. Okay, so we need a level sequence that we want to work with when we have sequencer open. So I need to kind of get some stuff happening in here. But under Take Recorder, you do need to choose a source. All right. And in this case, I'm just going to choose the player, which is this little player icon that you've kind of been seeing here. This is what's called the player start. So every time I've hit play, that's where the character is going to play from. So if you have a scene and you want to be able to have your character start in a specific position, you're going to want to move this to that specific position. So essentially like when you're doing your blocking, so that you can then have, yourself move from that location. So I will choose the player start, or just player. Okay. So now it'll allow me to record a scene. If you just hit the red button, it would start recording. But one of the things I like to do is actually hold down Alt and then hit the P key. Because when you hold down Alt and then P, it's going to put you into gameplay mode, and then you can hit record. Okay. And it's doing its little 3, 2, 1 countdown. And now it's starting to record. You see at the bottom there, it's recording a take. But if I start moving my character, I can play my animations. I can kind of move over here and play my animations as I want. And then hit stop or hit escape to stop it. And that is a first take. All right. So if you were to go into your content browser, you're now going to have a folder in here that's for cinematics. This is where all your takes are. So it'll give you a date for your take. It'll give you the scene that you've just generated, and it'll give you that animation. So if I double clicked on it, you'll get to see the animation just out here, just what I created. And if I wanted to take this, like this sub scene, you actually want to take this into a sequence, I can create a level sequence so I can begin editing and animating it or putting a camera to it. Okay, so essentially I created an animation clip that is going to allow me to just be an editor and a director for my animations. And if I'm like, oh, I don't like how I did that, I can go back into gameplay and re-record it. So it gives me like a little bit more ultimate power, I guess you can say, over your animations. So the really thing that's going to hold you back from being successful with this is maybe just the animations that you've put on your character. Okay, so I could create a new level sequence. I'll just do that real quick. I'll put it on my lecture. And we'll call this lecture sequence. I'm really great with naming. So if I wanted to take this take into here, I will just kind of click and drag and drop it. And what you'll start to see is now my character that I animated is right in here. He's going to stand there for a while because I did. Let's just make this longer. But then the character will just act out and do everything that I did in gameplay. Okay. And if I'm like, well, I don't like that there's this really long period of idling in the beginning, that's fine. It's just trash. I'll just cut it out. Just treat it like it's any other clip. Okay. I could add a camera to this and I can start starting to look at exactly how I might want to track this or how I might want to pose this particular animation. Maybe I want it to follow the character. You know, whatever story you're wanting to tell, you can start telling that story this way. Okay. And as you're kind of going through here as the director of your animation and you're realizing, I don't like how this worked. I don't like what the character did at that moment. Great, no problem. Because we can go back and we can record another take, right? I can Alt P it and oops, I hit the wrong button. Alt P, hit record and start moving. So maybe I wanted to do the double arm wave to start. And then I could even, if I wanted to, just be the other character and have like a little bit more subdued wave. And that's great, right? Because at this point, it's however you want to be tracking and posing and doing your scene. Okay. So,
hey Liz,
yes.
Question for you. Some people have DM'd me and asking, can you have both characters up at the same time? So the new one that you're recording is kind of like you can refer to the other one and react to it with your new set of animation that you're driving. Essentially, they want to be able to see the previous take and the current take, being executed. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I'm not actually done that, but I know you can. Oh yeah, it says it's a level sequence. So you can bring it in, I believe, as its own level sequence. So I just kind of made a source for a level sequence and then changed this in here. And I believe it should come in and play. Oh, I need to change the character's location. So that character's going to sit there and then move. So then I can react to the character. I can still jump. So you can create a bunch of them in there if you want to. That's sort of what I did for the other one. For that video I showed earlier, I had a level sequence that it was a different one. It was blending. But I can follow the character around, or I can have the character in there and react to it as I needed to. So, and you can create more of them. So if you had multiple takes, you can do that. If you wanted to change out what character, so say I wanted this to be Manny instead of Quinn, I could do that as long as the skeleton was the same.
Yeah, so you're kind of acting against yourself.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, take recorder, and it's kind of very powerful. Just some additional other settings for you. So if you wanted to go to the settings up here, like for instance, you hate that 3, 2, 1, you find that very frustrating. You can come down to the bottom here and turn off the countdown from 3 to 0. So now it'll just play, especially if you're not someone like me who needs to just, you know, I'm going to sit there for a minute and think about it and make sure I can time out what I want perfectly. So all of these settings will allow you to change the default state, and tells you where it's going to record, where it's going to start at the current time. You can set different default tracks and change the movie take settings. So this is if you needed to go in and change various settings for whatever you might be doing. You can change it different user settings if you wanted to maximize the viewport or stop at the playback end, so whenever it's over with. So take recorder, again, great for motion capture, great for capturing the sort of character movement. So that's it. And I got about 15 more minutes. And so if y'all wanted me to show, I could, I did want to sort of go into my character blueprint, or no, not my character blueprint, my blend space, and make it a little bit more complicated if you wanted to where you can have multi-directional, because, you know, this is not the most awesome walk in the world, but.
Well, you have 5 minutes until we go into the next break. And then there's a 10-minute break and we go into course lab. So, and then there's a ton of people that have questions. So you can do a little modification for 5 minutes if you want to showcase that. And then we'll wrap it up, and we'll take the break and we'll move to course lab.
Sure. So I wanted to show at least the multi-directional blend space for those of you who are interested in that. I lost my mouse somehow. The multi-directional blend space, it's multi-direction. It's not that complicated. It's the only couple things we'll have to do. I'm going to change this name from the horizontal axis to be direction. So that, and then the vertical to be speed. And again, we'll make this 250. That's a lot of divisions in there. So we'll make this back to maybe 2, might need 3 divisions in here. We'll see. 2 and 4. So what I'm going to do instead is make it to where, because I have a lot of animations in here, I'm going to make idle, just use the default idle, put it all across the bottom here. Okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to make it to where the character can go from a idle to a walk. So again, now its speed is up here. Okay, so idle goes from a hold control, idle to walk. But also we're going to do a strafe right walk. Okay, so walk into strafing right, and then also a strafing left. And also a walk backwards. So I'm going to do walk backwards on either side, because the character can shift from walking backwards strafing right, and can walk backward from strafing left, and can go from idle to walking backwards on either side. All right, so all we've added here is some directionality for the character movement. So it might look a little bit better. And that's all we got to do for that. Okay, we just added those animations into the blend space. The other thing we're going to have to do is update the state machine, because now I need to put this into speed. I am using direction, so I will right click and promote direction to a variable. So because we want the program, we want Unreal to determine our direction. So let compile. And then the last thing we have to do is on the event graph, remember, we're only setting velocity or speed here, but we also need to be able to get direction. So to do that, I need to bring in a node that says calculate direction. Okay. So with this calculate direction, I need to first also get the velocity, which we already have. Okay. And I need to know the actor's rotation. So this says base rotation. So I need something to go in there. And fortunately, they have a node that is get actor rotation. But again, this is going to be context sensitive. So I'm going to drag it out and say get actor. Nope, because I'm going to have to get context from the actor, which is the try get pawn owner, which is from here. So get actor rotation. I could uncheck context sensitivity and it'll find it, but I like to get the context sensitivity, and then that just plugs into there. So now I'm getting the rotation of the character, it's calculating its direction, and then it needs to set that direction from that variable that we created. Bang, that is it. You can take your screenshot if you're doing it over there, Daniel. So with this done, I would compile and save and crack up in here. And now I'm going to have, it's a little bit funky. I probably went too fast somewhere. I'm going to have to do some adjustments. It's like going backwards. Probably because I changed this direction. So I might need to flip this around because I like to have the horizontal be direction. And so it likely wants me to come back in here. Let's just first check to see if I have everything set right. Yeah, it looks like it's right. But I likely would, the really quick fix for it would just be to flip these around and then flip this around. That's sort of why I like its direction to be on the bottom. Alternatively, I can just remake the blend space if it's too frustrating to flip it around, to just make sure I have idle at the bottom and the actual walk at the top. And if I wanted to add run in here, I can just chug these down. And there are some run animations that you can play with. The run strafe and the left run strafe. And then there's also a running backwards, which just go right above the walk. So you could add those in here. But again, me doing that, I would likely want to change this back to 500. So I'm 1 minute over, but I just wanted to show y'all you can do a little bit more of a complicated blend space and multi-direction so that you can make the animations look a little bit smoother.